This is the meme. It says, when you are looking for the basic difference between the left and the right, look to the young. Our 17-year-old versus their 17-year-old. And this meme is shared by the left and the right in the exact same way to make the exact same point.
I just want to make an argument real quick about the simulation. If you guys remember, they have the same birthday too.
Yeah. Was it
January 17th? They have the same birthday.
And Greta have the same birthday.
Same year.
We talked about that, I think, when he was on the show.
With Rittenhouse.
That's right.
Yeah, Luke encouraged him to get married.
This is crazy.
Crazy.
Well, she's a foreign, leftist, climate change, global elite, and he is a working class, suburban/rural American kid.
But you're in that dimension.
Insane.
In the other dimension, they flip it almost and see her as the working class, right?
No. Well,
I think they do. I think they see her as like this more blue collar, like activist, and they see him as like this privileged elitist.
Honestly, I think one of them obviously stands for liberty. Yeah. And they are incredibly opposed to that. Everything that image stands for, they're incredibly opposed to. When it comes to like the liberal elite and control and passing more government regulation when it comes to climate change and everything like that, that agenda is the most attractive thing to them because that agenda to them is safety. It's that like government-controlled, safe world that you live in, whereas the other one's a little bit more risky, but there's more liberty.
I can sense as they keep advancing carbon capture technology now, like oil companies are withdrawing the carbon from the air and storing it underground. They're learning how to turn it into graphene for building. It's the momentum of the climate change thing is fizzling. I can sense it on the internet. Like, it's just not exciting to complain about the future of carbon when people know you can easily, or at least actively pull it out. Like, it's becoming obvious that the next problem is going to be taking too much carbon out of the air.
That's really interesting that you're saying that. I'm not even familiar with that. But technology every single year.
It's like the
just
poop in New York.
Getting better and better.
They were concerned about horse crap on the streets of New York, and the car got invented. So, do you guys know about 15-minute cities?
Sort of. I've heard of it.
This idea that in the future, everybody will live within 15 minutes of whatever they need. Right. You'll never need to really go anywhere. You'll have whatever you want. There's this really funny video I just saw. Someone sent it to me. And it's a guy explaining 15-minute cities. And he says, I want to explain to you the concept of the 15-minute city. And then he walks up to this shed thing and opens it, and there's chickens standing there. And he goes, these are its citizens. Inside their 15-minute city, they have everything they could ever need. Then they walk inside, and he goes, there is food and water readily available. Now, they can leave whenever they want, but they don't want to because it's scary and it's dangerous outside. And why? Inside here, they own nothing, but they're happy. And he says, and then he walks into the room and he's like, this is where they produce things that I can take for free. And then he picks the eggs up and he puts them in his sweater and he's like, here's a couple. And he's like, see, in the 15-minute city, you will own nothing. You will be happy. You'll be provided for. And then we can take everything from you. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, product. It really is a great video explaining what their plan is. How these city planners, how the Davos group types want to run the show. Treating us like chickens, making us do the work that they can take, and keeping you locked in a chicken coop.
Mm-hmm.
They want you living and dying on an assembly line. You know, that's it.
As you guys were saying that, I was like, well, they don't want him doing that. They want like a thinking class of people to join them, basically. Like, do you guys think about the plebs and the elites? Like, do you think there's a class differential? The Romans would say it's the plebs. Was it like a nutrition issue? Like, all these people, they're from people that didn't have nutrition for generations. They've been bred to be stupid workers. And then the elite class have all the good food. They can think. They can write the law.
Yeah, it's the Morlocks and the which ones? I don't know. Was it Morlocks?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Time Machine or something.
Oh, but there's definitely a class issue in this country.
What was the intelligent ones?
I'm looking at Morlocks, fictional species.
In
the antagonists are the Morlocks.
He goes to the future where humans have evolved into two different species. One's really dumb and one's really smart.
This is from the Time Machine.
Yeah.
Oh, LOI?
LOI, that's what it is. LOI or something?
Yeah, LOI.
So take a look at this article from the Daily Mail. If there's a civil war, I'm fighting. Trump loyalists face off with staunch liberals outside former president's NYC tower on the eve of his rumored arrest. I saw this article and I thought it was really funny considering the context. Because, like, I appreciate the protesters, right? But I was thinking about it and, like, I see this picture of this dude. I don't know who he is. Dion Cini, 54, founder of TrumpSwag.com, eating that cheeseburger and the French fries. And I'm like, he doesn't look like he's out of shape or anything. I'm just like, think about what this civil war is going to look like. It's not going to, so like the Confederates had just, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a true Confederate uniform. Very basic. Union uniforms were like blue or whatever. It was all very basic, mass-produced stuff. But like a modern civil war is going to be weird as hell. There's going to be people wearing like Uniqlo turtlenecks and Antifa.
It'll be like Walmart versus Forever 21. Those are the outfits.
Well, I mean, worse than that, it's going to be like Hunger Games, capital city people with like, you know, half their head is shaved and the hair is spiked to the side and they've got weird body modifications. And they're going to be waving gigantic multicolor flags of all different kinds. So you can't discern who is on what side because all the flags are different. But all you know is that their flag doesn't have Trump on it. They're probably not on your side. Then you're going to have people waving Trump flags of all different types. And it's like, it's going to get crazy.
Yeah, it'll be the they-them army against probably a pretty, they'd be pretty heavily armed. I would imagine the right wing would be. You know,
Yeah,
a lot of people bring up like the military getting involved and whatnot. I would imagine if it were to actually go down, it's not like military versus you. It's military splits as well, same as the nation. Military leaders that are more right-leaning and, you know, believe in whatever they would believe in,
and people
side with that side.
Man, I think people really need to start reading about the Civil War because I am by no means an expert in any way. But even just visiting Gettysburg, I'm like, oh, like there's so much I did not know. Like, for instance, I learned when I went to Gettysburg that one of the reasons the Confederates lost was because they were using muzzle-loaded rifles, but the Union had upgraded to breech-loading rifles. That means the Union would breech-loading is you crack the gun kind of breaks in half on a hinge, like a shotgun. You know, you ever see like Elmer Fudd load a shotgun? Breech load, you break it open, you put the shell in, you close it, you can fire. The Confederates were trying to muzzle load, and the Union soldiers were just firing, boom, real quickly. That was a technological advantage. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
They don't know what happened or why. Most people don't know the Confederates could have won the war in the first fight. I think the first Battle of Bull Run, they could have just walked into D.C. and won instantly. Yeah. And they decided not to. There's so much. But the important thing is, the reason I bring it up, how I think it was like, was it Lee who was talking, they're all West Point guys. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, but I can't fight against my own state. I have no choice but to leave and go back home.
Right.
People don't get that.
Yep.
That you're going to have somebody who's going to be like, I grew up here. You are not going to send me to occupy my own street corner. Mm-hmm. Somebody who was born and raised in West Virginia, who's like now living in D.C., because it's only about an hour, 2-hour drive, depending on where you're at. I mean, if you're in central West Virginia, it could be 4 or 5 hours. But then they're like, okay, now we're going to have you go with this gun to you know, your state. And they're going to be like, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That will happen.
Shelby Foote is a historian, someone I was looking at a lot reading when I was writing this book. And he said, he's from the South. He said something about the Union thought they were fighting to keep the Union together, and the South was fighting the Second American Revolution.
Yep.
But there were a lot of people who lived down there who didn't give a crap about the war at all. But if you came into their territory, they're going to fight you, which to the Union looks like you're a Confederate, but they're just defending their property because they see them as an invading force.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And in the South, they were like, there would be sons who saw the North as an invading force, and their fathers fought the British in the Revolution who saw the British as an invading force.
Yeah.
So it's like 2 generations in a row, basically, of fighting invading forces.
And that's crazy.
Super crazy.
Wow.
It's wild.
I mean, I think
haven't even checked out any of that stuff. Like, I haven't gone to any of those battlegrounds
You need
or anything
to.
like that. I would love to.
Gettysburg is cool,
Yeah,
cool
I'd
place.
love
I mean,
to.
the whole
Gettysburg
city
would
is
be-
basically a Civil War
Antietam's
museum.
close too. It's
Harper's
the
Ferry is
Bloody
wild.
Yeah,
Battle.
Antietam.
Harper's Ferry.
Obliterated.
We ride our bikes past Antietam like
Beautiful.
whenever we going up. We go up to what's that little town? Do you know which one it is?
Hagerstown.
No. There's a little bitty one.
Sharpsburg.
Sharpsburg. Yeah.
With the best
there's a
ice
little-
cream in Maryland.
I know,
Yeah.
man. For those that don't know, there's like this really famous. It's like $1 for this bowl of ice. It's
Giant
crazy.
ice cream. Yeah. But
I don't know, it's a
Antietam's
couple
right
bucks.
there, and it's beautiful.
And they've put up all of these Civil War informational things everywhere you go.
Yeah.
We're really close to John Brown's raid headquarters in Harper's Ferry.
Yeah, John Brown's house is the only place I ever felt a Black Lives Matter flag should be. I was like, okay, that makes sense there.
The one in Ohio?
For John Brown, no, in Harper's Ferry.
I agree, because I
that's
think
dope.
he would. But like,
He would like it, of
John
course.
Brown, I think was a crazy person.
Well-
I think he had something right about slavery being bad.
went about it
obviously,
in a different way.
Yeah, he went about it in a wrong way. But that's the problem I have with Antifa too.
Right.
Like, Antifa is like, hey, there's a bad thing happening in government. I'm like, yeah, I really agree about that. So why did you firebomb a black person's business?
Right.
And it's like, well, I don't, like, dude, John Brown raids an armory, and none of the slaves wanted to fight with him. They were like, dude, what are you doing?
With all his sons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, not to mention, he just went and murdered people, and then there's bleeding Kansas and all that stuff. A lot of people were like, dude, we agree with you, but this is not the way we want to go about doing it.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't think he was right, but there's a question of whether or not the people who were refusing to fight were right as
I
well.
believe he thought slavery was just going against God. and he had a calling by God, I believe.
He was
to
right
go
about
do
that.
it, right?
Dude,
I
But he
agree.
wasn't right about going
The
and
violence
shooting
part.
people in the face.
The violence part is where
Yeah.
I stopped too. Is I obviously don't want violence.
Yeah, I think of that.
He
with
was
like
hanged
abortion
for what he did.
clinics
I
and
think
stuff.
the first person hanged by the federal government. Is that true? I think
No, he was hanged
one
by
of the first-
Virginia, I'm pretty sure.
I think he was one of the first people. I forget where it was. I have to look that up. One
Yeah.
of the first people of something. Other
But
than
yeah, I
destroying
think-
all those things.
Dude, we did a video the other day asking people if the Civil War was enough payment for like slavery reparations and stuff. Like if that was enough payment
In terms of what, like
in terms of like there's talk
The
about
bloodshed?
just a bunch of cash, but yeah,
Yeah.
the bloodshed and stuff. Seeing
Yeah.
if like, hey, was that a sufficient payment for slavery or no?
I love when white people are saying that they did nothing. White people did nothing for slavery. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, white people also did fight the Civil War too,
Right.
And
you
won
should-
it.
You should know
and
that.
stopped it.
Right.
Not only did
Hundreds of thousands of lives lost.
like 2 million.
Horrible.
What was
Oh, was
the
it
number?
2 million?
Horrible.
Yeah,
There's
I think
scenes.
it's like a 1.8.
I
Oh,
wrote through
it was more than I
scenes
thought it was.
in this book that are based on like diary entries from different soldiers from all over the place and some from both sides. That you can smell the blood in their diary, like in terms of how they write it. You know, how
about
just
between
so hardcore.
between
Disgusting.
600 and 1 million dead.
Yeah.
And so
Disgusting.
on the Union side, you had 290,000 dead Union soldiers. The Confederate side was 365,000 dead soldiers. The total casualties, injured, prisoner of war, etc., 864,000 on the Union side and 828,000 on the Confederate side.
Wow.
So it's like 290,000 people died, 864,000 people suffered some kind of injury. Is that not enough for the country to be ripped apart, for people to be shooting and killing each other, for the march to the sea, the ransacking and destruction of the burning of Richmond? None of that. When they come out and they're like, this country was built on slavery, and it's like, and it was also burned down partly because of it. So I mean,
Well,
I kind of feel like, you know, the payment's done.
You know, when slavery was abolished, the population was like 25 million people. So it's obviously it's evil what was happening with slavery, but to suggest that the country was built on slavery, it's like, really, the slaves built in New York, or like, what are you talking about?
I mean, to be fair, like in a certain respect, yes, in a lot of these places, slaves did construction, slaves worked at the stores, and a lot of people don't understand this either. I would imagine if you ask, you should maybe do this. Most Americans' view of a slave is probably coming from these movies where it's like a black man in a field being whipped. What they don't also realize is that a lot of slaves were like cobblers, and they were people in cities working at stores and doing regular trade work, but they just they weren't free to leave. They couldn't do whatever they wanted. They couldn't own property. They couldn't read or write, or some of them could, but they typically couldn't. People don't understand that slaves did all manners of work.
Yeah.
And like none of it was good. You keep taking away someone's agency to strip them from the work they produce is like the antithesis of what this country is supposed to be. But in that respect, yeah, in places like New York, slaves did provide a large component. And then the country ripped in half, shot at each other like crazy. Cities were burnt to the ground. Nearly 2 million people suffered some kind of casualty, with nearly 1 million dead. And I'm kind of like, what is that? 1/25 of the entire population suffered, died.
Yeah.
Let me.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I think 25 million would probably be a high estimate during the Civil War.
Is that adult age or total?
I think that's total. I believe that's total
that's
off the
like-
top of my head. 25 million.
31 million people. There were in 1860, the U.S. population was 31 million.
I wonder how many adults.
So 1/30 of the country died because of, mostly because of slavery. I mean, you ask people who are from the South and who have family and history, they'll tell you it wasn't because of slavery. And people need to understand the nuance there. It's like you were saying.
Yeah.
For somebody who just lived in, Arkansas or something, you've got Union soldiers marching through, shooting, burning, and you're like, I don't know or care. You're fighting.
Right.
The other thing is, people will look at the Civil War and be like, the Union's all good, Confederates all bad. I mean, if you know anything about history, it's just that's such a false way of looking at it.
Pretty sure the most evil dude in the whole thing was Sherman.
Sherman hated black people. Wrote about it fairly extensively, and then also was okay with one of his guys who was, I believe, a general. Someone beneath him, though, so he's not a general, but he was a Union guy who happened to be named Jefferson Davis. Oddly enough, so the simulation's been happening since the Civil War. But this Union soldier named Jefferson Davis was in charge of. They didn't like freed slaves following them, so they killed them. They pulled out the bridge from beneath them as they were trying to cross a river in Georgia during the March to the Sea. Killed them. I believe it was hundreds. I put it in the book. It's a crazy thing. And that's fine.
Real quick for people,
them.
for people who don't know, the March to the Sea, I believe, was the first instance of scorched earth.
Scorched earth here, yeah.
Damn, dude.
Scorched earth.
Scorched earth refers to, in war, destroying arable land, burning down houses, killing civilians, etc., so that nothing can be rebuilt, and you decimate their chance at reconstruction.
They would make Sherman neckties. They'd burn the railroad tracks and then pull them and stretch them around trees so the trains couldn't get to the Confederate camps, burned everything down. And then there's a lot of people who would claim that Sherman came to their house and burnt it down. But there were also people who were like advantageous and become marauders and had nothing to do with Sherman, but then went and destroyed things to pilfer. Because
that's still his fault.
Exactly. Yeah, because he created the atmosphere where it's actual hell on earth. He said he wanted to make the South, I believe, squeal.
Scorched earth, man.
They did it to Germany.
It's so evil, dude.
Well, that's war.
It is evil.
It's not. It's a war tactic. It's really not evil.
Yeah, no, it's evil.
It's war.
No, Sherman.
Hey, I'm sorry,
I put this in the book. I look at Sherman as our first atom bomb, and he went down to the South and just decimated. And those people are reeling from that to today. Like in the town in the book, even though Sherman didn't make it to this exact town, these people have family dating back to the Revolution in Georgia, pre-Georgia, pre-United States, and they're still feeling like effects from just how decimated Georgia was from the March to the Sea.
So for the people who were in the South, because there was a percentage of these states who were in favor of staying with the Union and who opposed slavery. In fact, Virginia initially voted to stay with the Union, and it wasn't until the federal troops got sent down to Fort Sumter that they or I think it was slightly after this, they were like, whoa, this is getting crazy. We're going to break off. And then 4 more states joined. Right. So what people don't realize is that these states weren't in unison being like, hurrah, secession. There was a vote and there was a split and there was debate.
Yeah.
So let's say you're a family that just happened to live in Georgia. Let's put it this way. Let's put it in a modern context. Let's say you are living in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Yep. It's like fairly woke, huh?
Oh, yeah.
But you're in West Virginia, which is 86% MAGA. Yep. Imagine if there was a civil war and West Virginia, being MAGA country, gets invaded by Union soldiers, and then the Union, let's say Federal National Guard come in, take over your house, occupy it. You have no idea why, even though you're like, I don't agree with these people. I don't like what's going on. There's gunfights, and they burn down your property, and everything your family owned is now gone. Do you deserve reparations? After the war is done,
immediately after,
should they come and say, we're sorry that our invasion of the state had a negative impact on you. We're going to help rebuild your home.
Actually, there's actually, I believe, like a statute for that, because it's like during some current, it has to fall around like a current time. So you would deserve reparations from the federal government immediately after if the federal government did something like that to your property.
And I will say real quick about the massacre, about with what I was saying with Sherman and March to the Sea. Lincoln did go down, and then he took some land from people and gave it to the families of the freed slaves who did survive.
Well, here's my point. Let's say you were a family in Georgia, and you're like, we don't like slavery. We don't want to be involved in slavery. We don't want to secede from the Union. We can't control it. We're not in politics. We're just some farmers who mind our own business. Then Sherman comes, walks up to your house and throws a torch in it, destroys everything. Your kids struggle to survive. Maybe some siblings die. Now it's 100 or so years later, and you're living in a trailer where your family used to be, farmers of modest living and moderate living. You are now impoverished. Do you deserve reparations for the destruction the Union forces brought to your land?
If it's 100 years later, I have a hard time saying yes to that.
I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying when they go to Californians and say, we're going to give you reparations, despite the fact that California was admitted as a free state and has always been against it, it's like, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a virtue.
Well, what they're talking about in California is San Francisco. They're talking about $5 million per descendant of slave or whatever. You have to check a couple boxes. There's like 8 options, and if you check like a few of them or whatever, you can get that $5 million, and it's like an unbelievable amount of money. But also California as a whole, July, they have $223,000 that they're trying to give to each descendant of slave in the state.
You don't need to be black. You need to identify as black.
It did say that. Yeah. That's true.
And so we went over this, and there's certain criteria where someone like Rachel Dolezal will be eligible. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.